You don't need all this land, Amanda. Your sister has 3 kids to think about. My father's voice boomed across the Sunday brunch table, making the china rattle. I gripped my coffee mug tighter, trying to maintain my composure as I watched my parents and sister Katie orchestrate their latest attempt to take what was mine. My name is Amanda Mitchell, and at 32, I had transformed my grandfather's old farmland into a thriving organic produce business. The 100 acres he left me had become my sanctuary, my purpose, and apparently, my family's newest target. We're not discussing this again, I said firmly, meeting my father's stern gaze. Grandpa left this land to me for a reason. I've spent 5 years building something meaningful here. Katie, perfect Katie with her perfect family, jumped in with her usual dramatic flair. But my kids need space to grow up. Your nieces and nephew deserve. What about what I deserve? I cut her off, surprising everyone, including myself. I've poured everything into this land. My savings, my time, my future. Mom reached across the table, her expression a practiced mix of concern and manipulation. Honey, you're single. You don't have a family to think about. Katie needs. I have a family, I interrupted again. My employees, my customers, the community that depends on our organic produce. Just because I'm not married doesn't make my work less valuable. Dad slammed his hand on the table, making everyone jump. This isn't about your little garden project. This is about family. About doing what's right. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. My little garden project supplies produce to half the restaurants in town. I employ 15 people. I'm not giving it up just because Katie wants a bigger backyard. You're being selfish, Katie sniffed, clutching her designer handbag. My children. Your children have a 4-bedroom house and a huge yard, I reminded her. What they don't have is any right to my property. That's when Dad's face turned that dangerous shade of red I remembered from childhood. We've already promised Katie she could build her dream home here. The contractors are coming next week. My blood ran cold. You what? It's done, Amanda, Mom said softly. We've already paid the deposit. Katie's house will be perfect right where your current greenhouse is. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and pulled up my security app. Sure enough, there were several recent photos of men in suits measuring and marking areas around my greenhouse. They had been on my property without my permission. Get out, I said quietly, my voice trembling with rage. All of you, get off my property. Don't be dramatic, Katie rolled her eyes. This is happening whether you like it or not. Dad's already arranged everything. I turned to my father, the man who had always favored Katie, who had dismissed my dreams as hobby since I was a child. If you or any contractors step foot on my land without permission, I'll call the police. He stood up, towering over me like he used to when I was small. You ungrateful little. I'm your father. This is family land. No, I corrected him, standing my ground. This is my land. Legally, morally, and in every other way that matters. Leave. Now. They left, but not before my father's parting shot. We'll see about that. I should have known he wouldn't give up easily. The next morning, I woke to the sound of heavy machinery. Racing outside in my pajamas, I froze in horror at the sight before me. My father was behind the wheel of a bulldozer, plowing through my carefully tended organic gardens. Katie stood nearby, pointing out where her new house would go, while Mom supervised the destruction of 5 years of my hard work. Stop, I screamed, running toward them. What are you doing? Making room for your sister's future, Dad called out, not even pausing as he destroyed another row of crops. You had your chance to be reasonable. I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands shaking as I documented the destruction. Then I called the police. You can't call the police on your own father, Mom shrieked, trying to grab my phone. Watch me, I replied, stepping back. And I've got security cameras recording everything too. Katie's smug smile faltered slightly. You're bluffing. You don't have security cameras. I pulled up the app again, showing them the multiple angles currently recording their criminal behavior. Grandpa taught me to always protect what's mine. I've got cameras covering every inch of this property, and they've been recording since you first sent those contractors to trespass last week. The sound of police sirens in the distance made them all freeze. Dad switched off the bulldozer, his face pale. You've gone too far, I told them as the police cars pulled up. Way too far. As the officers approached, I could see the reality of their actions finally starting to sink in. But I knew this wasn't over. My family had always been relentless when they wanted something, and they wanted my land. What they didn't know was that I had more evidence than just security footage. Grandpa had left me more than just land. He left me everything I needed to protect it. The upcoming court date would show them exactly how well I'd learned from him. The 2 weeks following the bulldozer incident were a nightmare of legal meetings and family drama. My father was charged with criminal damage to property, but my mother somehow convinced the prosecutor to offer a plea deal, community service, and restitution for the destroyed crops. But that wasn't the end of it. While I was meeting with my lawyer about the criminal case, Katie filed a civil suit claiming she had a right to part of the property based on some verbal agreement with our parents. "They're getting desperate," my lawyer Martha said as we reviewed Katie's claim. "But I think it's time we show them what your grandfather left you." I nodded, opening my safe to pull out the leather portfolio I'd kept hidden for 5 years. Inside was everything Grandpa had prepared before his death. Documents, letters, and evidence of my family's past attempts to take advantage of him. "Are you sure about this?" Martha asked, her eyes widening as she read through the contents. "Once we present this in court, there's no going back. Your family. They stopped being family the moment Dad destroyed my livelihood." I replied firmly. Grandpa knew this would happen. That's why he prepared everything. The morning of the civil hearing, I arrived at the courthouse to find my entire family waiting. Mom rushed over, her face a mask of concern. "Amanda, please," she pleaded. "We can still fix this. Just give Katie 10 acres. That's all she needs for her house." I walked past her without responding. Katie's husband Mark tried next, blocking my path. "Be reasonable," he said. "Think about the children. They deserve to learn that destroying other people's property is okay as long as you want something." I cut him off. "Great lesson." Inside the courtroom, Katie's lawyer presented their case first. He talked about family obligations, verbal promises, and the importance of providing for future generations. Katie took the stand, crying on cue about how I was destroying our family over just a piece of land. When it was my turn, Martha called me to the stand. "Ms. Mitchell, could you tell us about the day your grandfather gave you this land?" I took a deep breath. It was 3 months before he died. He called me to his study and showed me all the documentation he'd prepared. He knew what would happen after he was gone. "What do you mean?" I pulled out the first document from the portfolio. This is a video recording of my parents and sister trying to convince Grandpa to sell the farm 2 years before he died. They wanted to develop it into luxury homes. The courtroom went silent as Martha played the video. There was my family, pressuring my elderly grandfather, calling his organic farming ideas outdated and worthless. Then came my father's voice. "Just sign it over, Dad. We know what's best for the family." Objection. Katie's lawyer jumped up. "This is irrelevant to the current case." On the contrary, Martha replied smoothly. "This establishes a pattern of behavior that led Mr. Mitchell to take specific precautions with his will." The judge allowed the evidence. Next came the letters. Dozens of them, documenting every time my family had tried to manipulate Grandpa out of his property. And finally, the most damaging evidence of all. "This is a notarized statement from my grandfather," I said, my voice steady, "recorded 1 month before his death, specifically stating that the land should never be divided or developed. He left it to me because I was the only one who shared his vision for sustainable farming." I looked at my family as Martha played the video. Mom had her face in her hands. Dad looked like he might explode. Katie was frantically whispering to her lawyer. Furthermore, I continued, Grandpa added a clause to the deed. "If anyone contests my ownership or tries to force development of the land, they forfeit their inheritance from his estate, including the trust funds he set up for Katie's children." That was the bombshell. Katie's face went white. The trust funds for her kids were worth far more than any piece of land. She'd been counting on that money for their private school education. "You knew about this," she shrieked, jumping up. "You knew about the trust funds and still let us file this lawsuit." "I tried to tell you to leave it alone," I replied calmly, "multiple times. But you and Mom and Dad wouldn't listen. You never listen." The judge called for order as Katie dissolved into real tears this time. Her lawyer quickly requested a recess to confer with his client. In the hallway, I watched my family huddled together, their perfect plan crumbling around them. Mom kept shaking her head. Dad looked defeated, and Katie was frantically calling her financial advisor. Martha touched my arm. They'll withdraw the lawsuit. They have to, or they lose everything. I nodded, feeling surprisingly empty. This victory didn't bring me joy, but it did bring something else. Peace. Finally, they would have to accept that the land was mine, that my work mattered, that I wasn't just the single daughter they could push around. But as I watched them scrambling to save what they could of their situation, I knew there was one more surprise left, one final piece of evidence that would change everything. After Katie withdrew her lawsuit, I thought my family would finally leave me alone. Instead, they launched a different kind of attack. Mom started telling everyone in town that I'd destroyed the family over greed. Dad gave interviews to local papers, painting himself as a heartbroken father whose daughter had turned against him. Katie posted tearful videos on social media about how I'd stolen her children's future. But I had one last card to play, Grandpa's final letter, meant to be revealed only if things went this far. "Are you sure about this?" Martha asked as we prepared for the final hearing to settle the restitution amount for my destroyed crops. "This will change everything." I nodded, clutching the sealed envelope. They've left me no choice. The courtroom was packed. My family had made sure their side of the story had spread far and wide, gathering sympathy and support from people who didn't know the whole truth. I saw familiar faces from town, most avoiding my eyes, already convinced by my family's version of events. As the hearing began, Martha stood up. "Your Honor, before we discuss restitution, my client would like to present one final piece of evidence that directly relates to the property damage and the pattern of harassment she's endured." Katie's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope for the first time and began to read. "My dearest Amanda, if you're reading this, then everything I feared has come to pass. Your family has tried to take what's yours, just as they tried to take what was mine. But there's something they don't know, something I've kept secret for decades. The land I left you isn't just farmland. 20 years ago, I discovered something valuable beneath it, a natural spring with unique mineral properties. I've had it tested, verified, and protected legally. The water rights alone are worth millions. Your father knows about this. He discovered my research 10 years ago and tried to force me to sell. When I refused, he and your mother began their campaign to discredit my mental capacity, hoping to gain control of the property. That's why I made sure you would inherit everything, because you were the only one who loved the land for what it was, not what it could be sold for. I'm sorry for the burden this knowledge brings, but you deserve to know the truth about your inheritance and your family's actions. Love, Grandpa." The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I looked up to see my father's face drain of color. Mom had frozen in her seat while Katie stared at Dad in shock. "Your Honor," Martha continued, "we'd like to submit these additional documents, geological surveys, water rights certificates, and correspondence showing Mr. Mitchell's attempts to gain control of the property through questionable means." Dad stood up abruptly. "This is a lie. She's forged these documents." "The documents have already been authenticated," Martha replied calmly. "Additionally, we have evidence of Mr. Mitchell's recent attempts to sell water rights he doesn't own to several beverage companies." That was the final blow. Dad sank back into his seat as whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. The town's sympathy was shifting as they realized the true story behind our family drama. The judge took one look at the new evidence and immediately ruled in my favor, ordering maximum restitution for the destroyed crops and adding a restraining order preventing my family from coming near my property. Outside the courthouse, Mom tried one last time. "Amanda, please," she begged. "We can work something out. Share the profits as a family." "Family?" I laughed quietly. "You stopped being family the moment you chose greed over me. The land stays as Grandpa wanted, an organic farm. The spring will remain untouched." "But think of the money," Katie protested. I replied. "I'm thinking of the sustainable income the farm provides for our employees, the healthy food we provide for our community, and the legacy Grandpa trusted me to protect. 5 years have passed since that day. My organic farm has flourished, expanding to include an educational center where we teach sustainable farming practices. The spring remains our secret, its water naturally irrigating our crops just as it has for generations. My family? They moved away after the truth came out, their reputation in town irreparably damaged. Sometimes I get messages from Katie's kids, now teenagers curious about their aunt and the farm they've heard so much about. I've invited them to visit to learn about their great-grandfather's legacy and to understand that true wealth isn't always about money. The land Grandpa left me has become more than just property. It's a testament to standing up for what's right, protecting what matters, and finding success on your own terms. Every morning, as I walk through my restored gardens, I thank him for trusting me with his legacy and for giving me the tools to protect it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about winning or losing. It's about staying true to your principles and letting the truth speak for itself.